Welcome to the Chase MedSearch Podcast, the place where we dive deep into the medical device sales industry by discussing the current trends, timeless philosophies, and amazing experiences that shape our niche of the industry. Join me, Jordan Chase, on a guided tour as I speak with established sales leaders and professionals as they share stories that will help you get in, stay in, and thrive in your medical device sales career. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch Podcast, and hope all of you, if you've got kids, got them back to school. We said farewell to our oldest son, who's headed to SMU, and he'll be starting this Monday, and that was quite a experience. But I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, and that is Kat Hurd. Kat is the CEO and founder of the MedTech Collective, a boutique consulting firm that specializes in corporate strategies and programs centered around leadership and talent development. At the Collective, we believe your team is the superpower, and we are passionately focused on supporting your organization in leveraging the power of your people. Kat brings quite a bit of experience in neuromodulation and interventional pain, nearly 2 decades. She was with Boston Scientific for quite some time and rose to a position of significant leadership there, and then went to a startup in the interventional pain neuromodulation world called Saluda Medical. And for the past 8 months, she's been leading the MedTech Collective. Welcome to the Chase MedSearch Podcast, Kat.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. I am honored to be here. I'm always humbled when I get these opportunities because I think why do you want to talk to me? But when you read back my bio, I do have a lot to talk about, lots of decades of experience. So I'm very excited to be here.
You absolutely have a wealth of experience to share with our audience. And there's a lot of people in the interventional pain space and neuromodulation space and in other medical device verticals. And then a delightful kind of new thing that's happened is new grads are listening to it as well.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that want to break into medical devices. And so as I think about trying to serve this audience in these conversations that we have, one thing that I always go back to is early foundations. And because there's a chunk of folks out there that are right in their early foundations. How did you get into medical devices?
Oh, man. My story, I would say, is very similar to how most folks get into this industry, which is grit and a lot of grinding. And, my background is a little bit more clinical than most, at least when I started 15 years ago. My background was in sports medicine. So I was an athletic trainer. I was taping ankles, rehabbing ankle sprains, knee injuries, all of those things that you would see on the sidelines with sports teams. And I had some good friends that were in medical device sales. And I realized finishing my master's, I was going to be making very little money and working a whole lot. And so I thought, what else can I do with my background and my degrees to really create a stable future for myself and do something unique? And I started asking everyone I knew who was in their network, who they were connected with by 3 degrees, 6 degrees of separation, to start to build an awareness of what the medical device industry was and truly start to have those conversations and build that network to be able to crack in. And as luck would have it, enough of those conversations, certainly there were many no's, more than the 9 no's that they tell you you'll get before one yes. But what happened is I connected with the area vice president at Boston Scientific, who happened to be living in Iowa, of all places, and I was finishing graduate school there. Small world. And had a conversation with him. And I'll tie it back to, knowing that you have a lot of new grads that are listening. And I love that group because it's such an exciting time to be looking at med device, but it's also really overwhelming, right? It's kind of like eating an elephant. Like, where do you take the first bite? And I will say the first thing you have to do is shed expectations and be willing to go anywhere and do anything. That's going to get you in the fastest. And that's how I landed in Arizona. So I met with the individual, Hap Peterson. A month later, he emailed me and said, hey, following up, because of course I was persistent in emailing him. And they had 2 positions in Arizona. So I packed 2 suitcases, moved on down after going through the interview process, of course. And I started my career with Boston Scientific in Arizona.
Yeah, and quite a career it was. If I look at just the awards that you proceeded to rack up as a territory manager, I see President's Club, President's Club, President's Club, President's Club, and Rep of the Year.
That was a big one.
So
Yeah, that was a big one.
that's a big one. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
And along the way, you became a sales advisory board member and just enjoyed a lot of success. And then ultimately were promoted to a regional business director role where once again, and it's predictable at this point, you won President's Club and then another President's Club.
Yeah.
You know, the enormous success in your roles there. But when you started, you were in more of a clinical role, weren't you?
I was. Yeah, I started clinically when I interviewed. So Ryan Galbraith, who is now the VP of Sales for the Interventional Pain Division at Boston Scientific Neuro, he was the regional manager that I interviewed with and who ultimately hired me. And I flew myself to Tucson, sat down with him, and he said, I just want to hire a clinical. I don't want a sales rep. And I looked at him and said, well, that's great because I just want to work with you. And that start on the clinical side, and that's why, Jordan, I said, just stay open, shed expectations and be willing to take something different than what you expected to get into the industry, knowing that by being humble and being really hungry, getting out there, and it's not just the grinding every day, but being intentional in how you work and how you bring value to teams, that you will have endless opportunities. And as you read off those awards, none of those awards were, won in a vacuum and by myself. Like, yes, my name might be on the trophies that are on my shelves, but they were team awards and team efforts. And really what stems all of those awards and all of those wins is that willingness to be humble and look to the folks to the right and left of you and say, how do we do this together? And how do I bring value to you and your practice and your patients? And if they're your reps or your clinical specialists, to your career, right? So really investing in those around you. When you do that, the awards are a byproduct. Mm-hmm. And I'll say they're less of a special byproduct than it is to see people growing their careers, see patients' lives changing, and see physicians that you work with having, really blooming practices.
Yeah. You've done some hard things at this point in your career. You've broken in, which is super hard to do. And then you were promoted from a clinical specialist into a territory manager role. And I think people don't realize how difficult that is. And some people spend a huge chunk of their career having that not happen for them. What do you think was the catalyst for you to make that transition from a CS to a territory manager and have the organization and your manager and your manager's manager, I'm sure was involved, make that bet on you as someone that could do that?
Yeah, I love that you use the word bet, right? Because that's what it is. Nothing is predicted. And as much as we try to say things are predictable in the business in this space, they aren't. I'll go back to that earlier concept I shared of staying open. And one of the things early on in your career that you have to stay open to is taking on tasks that you don't know how to do. So embracing that discomfort. I got some incredible advice when I started at Boston Scientific from our reimbursement manager of all people. So this individual was the person who did all of our pre-authorizations. He was our connection to the field. And his name was Dan Leos. Wonderful guy. I still stay connected with him. And what Dan told me, this was like probably day 2 of training. He said, you know what, Kat, you will be successful if you take as much work as you can off of your territory manager's plate. And I looked at him and said, okay, say more, because this is interesting. Like, you want me to do someone else's work? He's like, as much as you can make yourself an invaluable part of the team, that's the first piece of it. But you learn so much. You learn all facets of the business when you start to dip into things that aren't clinical specialist or aren't in your job description. And so I really took that to heart and said, all right, well, how do I help the people around me, right? It goes back to what I was saying about like those wins being wins because you were investing in the people around you. I invested in the reps that I worked with and said, how do I make your life easier? Because that's going to make my life better. I'm going to learn so much more and be a stronger individual in my current role. And then you take those opportunities and you're able to demonstrate to your leaders, right? So they will take that bet on you because they see that when given an opportunity, you're not just going to do what's expected of you. You're going to go above and beyond and challenge the norms to push outside of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. And I imagine that was a key ingredient, that attitude in your success as a TM and then your success as a manager. Tell us about that. I just always love to hear from people that have been so successful. Obviously, it was a team effort. You acknowledge that, but you certainly had a ton to do with that. If you were to distill for us, what is that's, I think by my count, 6 presidents clubs, 2 as a manager, 4 as a rep.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to distill some of the key ingredients to having that level of success repeatedly, right? This is sustainable success that you've built. How would you distill that? What would you say are some key ingredients in that mix?
Oh, I've thought about that in preparation because that's always, the question people ask is how do you do it and how do you do it consistently?
Yeah.
I'm still going to go back to humility, right? That humble and hungry combination. What happens to most people, what I've seen as a peer to people, as a leader, building teams myself, the first win or two, and you get this winner's high, and you think that that's going to carry you on. And you have to be humble to know that at any moment, something's going to change and it's going to challenge the way that you work and the way that you win. And so, really what that comes down to is adaptability.
Mm.
You have to be adaptable in this business. You absolutely have to have a chip on your shoulder. That's the reality of it. If you're in sales and you want to win, you need to run like someone's behind you and they're heading for you. And, that comes into the ability piece. Are you pushing yourself as hard as you can? And that's the skill of what you do, but having that will, having that hunger, and it boils down to what's your why, right? Why are you doing this? And so for me, it's pouring into the people around me. When I was a clinical specialist, it was the patients and the providers and helping them. When I was a TM, it was that plus my team. As a leader, it's your team, right? So long story long, right? What do I attribute it to? Being adaptable, being hungry to win at all costs, and then stretching yourself and your aptitude to really lean into that discomfort.
Wise words. Love it. You didn't rest on all these accomplishments, though. You did take a spin at a startup.
I did take a spin.
What led to that decision-making process in your career? You obviously had accomplished many, many things at Boston Scientific and, had built up quite a stock of credibility for yourself there. What was it about sort of, in a sense, starting over that was attractive to you in your career?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It was the idea of starting over and proving to myself that I can do hard things and do them in a way that I challenge myself and my own personal expectations. So I saw it as an opportunity. As you alluded to, I had so much success at Boston Scientific that I had an amazing amount of street cred and just like leadership capital there that I could have seen myself growing my career at Boston for all the way until retirement. But it was creating opportunities to challenge and prove to myself that I can go past that adaptability and really lean into this discomfort. And the other piece of it is, really leaning into my network and expanding my career with those who I'd grown the most with. And so part of that was Chris Crestangel, who I had the pleasure and opportunity to work with at Boston Scientific. He was one who hired me into the regional director role. And he made the move to Saluda. There were quite a few folks from Boston Scientific that made that move. And I thought, making a change, taking that challenge and that scary opportunity and getting to do it with people that I also trusted, I thought, that's a firestorm. That's very rarely going to happen in people's careers. And when I looked back at it, the reason I took that step off the ledge was because I didn't want to in 50 years think, man, what would have happened?
Yeah.
And I have no regrets. It was an incredible learning opportunity. And it's truly brought me to where I am now. So it was an important part of my journey.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that because now you're in business for yourself and started your own organization.
Yeah.
You're running the MedTech Collective now.
Yes. And what a learning experience. And I know that intimately all the, what do they call it? The pits and peaks of business ownership and that whole process. Even just getting my LLC, right? That was business 101.
Yep.
But so for me, it's been it's been such a, not just humbling, right? Everything that we do, I think, has a chance to help remind us of how small we are in this world and what chances we have to make impact. And that was really, my drive for wanting to do this was like, okay, I had this really unique experience at Boston Scientific where I built this very profound foundation. And then I went to Saluda and got to help scale a team, bring disruptive technology to market, and really challenge myself in ways that I hadn't been able to. And then past that, I thought, okay, well, how do I scale this? How do I do more with the same amount of time that we all have in our days? And that's where I really looked at it and said, instead of going to my next company for my next challenge, what if I got to work with as many companies as possible and as many people as possible by hanging my own shingle? And so the idea, I wish I could say that it came to me overnight. It has been this little seed that's germinated for over the last decade of really wanting to support women in industry, because that's a big piece of what I do and why I'm very passionate about MedTech Collective and the work that we're doing, and also get to help as many organizations as possible bring life-changing therapies to market. So real quick diatribe, but I was searching for a screenshot on my phone the other day, and I typed in gift card of all things because I was looking for a Starbucks barcode that I knew I had somewhere I needed to add to my balance. And the oldest screenshot that popped up was a picture of my computer of an Amazon search bar. And Startup Fast was the book. And in the search bar was best book for starting a business for women. I was like, oh, and what was the date on it? 2013. So it's been there swirling for a while. And it was having the faith and having that willingness to be uncomfortable that really led me to say it's now or never. I was turning 40 this year. And so I thought, if I'm going to do something crazy, now's a perfect time to do it.
Yeah, fantastic. I love hearing origin stories, if you will, of where these ideas came from. And it is quite a topic in conversation, as we've seen the last few years, lots of change in medical devices, organizations shedding their workforce, new organizations forming their startups, all kinds of different things happening that are very disruptive to people's careers. And so people are always intrigued and interested in hearing about someone, one of their own, if you will, one of the tribe that is not working at either a startup or a big company. They went and found it and they're doing something for themselves. In brief, what is the MedTech Collective?
Oh, brevity, right? That's the superpower that I am working on cultivating. So I will do my best.
Okay. Yeah.
So the way I look at MedTech Collective is a three-pronged approach. So sales and market strategy. And when I say market strategy, I mean go-to-market plans, pilots, all of those fun things that we love to do in the sales world. So that's our first vertical that we have. This next piece, the second vertical, is leadership training. As I alluded to, I'm very passionate about driving equity and equitable opportunities for all in the neuromodulation, interventional pain, and medical device industry realm. So that's the second prong. And then the third is talent development. So really helping organizations understand, once you have the people in the door, maybe they're not those leadership folks that you need to get to the next level, but how do you support, engage, and elevate the talent that you do have? Because we all know, and Jordan, this is the world that you live in. Yeah. It is very expensive, not just from a cost standpoint, but from a business loss, impact to the organization, cultural deficits, to lose folks and to lose talented individuals that maybe just didn't see their future at an organization. So that's where the talent development piece, when done right, can be so transformational. So with MedTech, that's what we're looking at, is really an amalgam of those three. It's bespoke consulting services. So the companies I work with are companies and connections that, some I've had for quite some time, others I met as I started this journey, and having those conversations of what do you need? What are the challenges you're facing? And how do we partner together so I can make your lives easier? And that's a phrase you've heard from me before, right? So it's now I'm taking, instead of looking at how am I driving value for the patients that we serve. Now this all boils back to the patients that are served by the med tech industry, but now it's looking at how do I add value at the organizational level to help impact and influence the people on the ground that are changing lives for those patients.
That's great.
Yeah.
Give us an idea, sort of, I know you're 8 months into it. How big is Your biggest client? How small is your smallest client?
Ooh, my smallest client is one I'm so excited about. And we're not ready to talk about them yet and what they're going to be doing in this space, but some really, really cool things.
Okay.
Nearly all of them are privately held organizations. My largest has sales in excess of 15 million annually.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
my smallest has sales of about 300,000 a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these companies are looking at doing things differently in terms of applications within this space. And it's not just neuromodulation. So looking at how do we support patients through their chronic pain journeys. I have at this juncture stayed in interventional pain,
Mm-hmm.
partially because it's what I know and love, and also because I do have a really strong passion for bringing affordable, accessible products that can be disruptive in this space and really supporting those.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing about it, but also I love it professionally because I can't wait for more of these companies to come to market and be ready for reps.
Yeah, right? I mean, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan, but the quote I always use is chaos is a ladder, which is one of the quotes from the show. And the idea that, people are like, oh, the space is changing all the time and it's growing and evolving. And how do you keep up with it? But that's prime time if you're a rep or to go, to the college grads that are listening in on this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to get into the industry, the first thing that you should be doing is taking in and consuming as much as you can about the growth in the medtech industry and starting to just, put a pin on companies that are doing unique and interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Spark Biomedical, who's looking at opioid use disorder
Mm-hmm.
and what they're doing and what they have the potential to do with their transauricular stimulator. You've got, VR coming into this space with Karuna Labs, and there's others on the market that are looking at how do we support patients in their health and wellness and healing journey virtually. That leaning into innovation, that's another thing that I'm very passionate about with MedTech Collective, is embracing AI, next gen technologies, not just iterating how things are done, but truly, truly innovating.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we haven't talked about is you also wear the title of executive coach.
I do.
Also, that's a separate service. Tell us about that.
It is, and I struggle with the title executive coach only because, to use my buzzword from today's, I want it to be accessible. And I was talking with one of the individuals that I recruited and brought on at one of the companies I was with. And, they were talking about moving into their leadership journey. And we had a great conversation. And then as we ended the conversation, he said, Kat, like, I'm so excited for you. And maybe one day, like, I'll be worthy enough of the title of executive and we can work together. And I thought that's the struggle I have with executive coaching. And I had this conversation with Jason Hannon back in January too, of it's like that, it's the E word, because for the average rep, they're thinking, well, I'm not an executive.
Right.
It's like, well, but you are. And it's having that executive mindset. And that's why coaching is so important.
Yeah.
And so, yes, technically I'm an executive coach. What I really focus on is supporting women and underrepresented populations in specifically interventional pain, because that's where I have the most industry experience, but across all of medtech, that's where I'm growing and expanding. And the reason that I lean into coaching is it ties directly into those, the three prongs that I mentioned for MedTech Collective of strategy, leadership, and talent development, because those are three ways to focus at it from the organizational level. That's kind of the top down, right? If it's three prongs, the triangle tip is at the top, but then you want to come from underneath and support the employee and their journey. And I get to do that as a coach and helping new leaders learn how to navigate their team, really leaning into their growth, their development, challenging them, right? Because you don't always get that challenge and that investment. Your manager is there to leverage your skills and leverage the organizational opportunity to drive growth, right? And they're going to invest in you. And every once in a while, you hit the jackpot. As I said earlier, I've had amazing mentors and leaders and have mentioned quite a few of them, but that's the exception, not the rule. So with executive coaching, the goal I have is to demystify the process, to say, how do you invest in yourself? how do you level up your skills and resource opportunities to take your career where you want it to go, whether it's where you're planted in the moment, where you want to be next, and really grow into that executive mindset. So I'll challenge myself and keep the executive coach title as long as I continue to challenge my clients and have them see themselves as executives.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. Do you find that people are paying out of pocket for this, or is this something their organization purchases for them? Or is it a mix?
It's a mix.
Mm-hmm.
And part of why I'm passionate about the coaching is that about 4 years ago, right as I was looking to really accelerate my career, that's when I leaned in and got myself a coach. And I had some organizational support. And then I actually was just like, I was so wowed by the impact that I was having. It's not even having a partner, it's having a collaborative resource that was going to challenge me and help me hold myself accountable. So I saw the change that that could make. And again, that's why I really leaned into it. But for those individuals that are looking to hire a coach and are paying directly themselves, I've got creative options, and I'm looking to build out some more group coaching strategies and really doing things that are going to allow people to build their careers in a way that's accessible.
I think I saw on LinkedIn a few months ago, there was a meeting that you ran.
There was a meeting. Thank you for asking.
It got a lot of notice and attention on LinkedIn. And there were a number of people there at that meeting that a lot of folks know, and I knew some of them too. Looked like it's just an excellent group. Tell us about that. Give us a snapshot of what went on there.
Yeah, that event, I have to, first and foremost, thank the Women Innovators in Pain Medicine, which is the Society WIPM. Mm-hmm. So WIPM was gracious enough to open their conference time and give us essentially a seat at the table as industry. And I've had this passion project for many years and have spoken with a lot of the societies about like, how do we create educational opportunities for reps? And, as I was launching my business, taking Passport to Success to WIPM was just a really natural first step. What Passport to Success was an opportunity for women in industry. It was open to men as well, but our topics were geared towards women in industry navigating the challenges with ease and grace. Like, how do you start to have the cheat codes, right? I feel like everything that we do these days, it's like, what are the shortcuts? How do you use AI? What are we doing? And sometimes we forget that the cheat codes are held in the people sitting around us, or maybe the people across the country that we haven't gotten to network yet. So at Passport to Success, I had 4 wonderful faculty that partnered on creating this with me from different organizations across industry. It was industry agnostic. And what we did is we talked about, the importance of mentorship and sponsorship. And I have to give Chris Crustangel a plug here because he has been a mentor and a sponsor throughout the entirety of my career. He was at WIPM and he changed his flight so he could be at Passport to Success, right? Wow. That's an ally there. Mm-hmm. And the importance of having those relationships and again, leaning in when you find them. We talked about imposter syndrome, navigating bias in the workplace. I mean, none of these are new topics, but they're things that reps don't often have the opportunity to reach across the aisle and take off their company badge and just talk about their experiences. And so I have to be totally honest. I was scared before the event. I was like, oh my gosh, are people going to come? I think there's a need for this. I've seen it with my own eyes in the organizations I've been in within the industry, but are people really going to show up? And as you shared, they did. We had over 40 women, a handful of men that attended. And I know that it's important and that it's needed because at the end of it, the feedback we got were, this was great. We wanted it to be longer. This was great. How do we have more of this? How do we have a whole weekend of this? How do we continue to grow together? Passport to Success round 1 was a huge success. Yeah. It's all about enabling and empowering by sharing skills and tools. And we are actually having a meeting this evening to talk about bringing it back to WIPM next year. So stay tuned.
That's fantastic. Nothing like a great launch meeting where that all comes together like that. That's fantastic. What a great kickoff. But you've got lots of ideas. You've also got something you're working on called MedTech Mastermind, which I'm keeping a close eye on myself. Tell us a little bit about that.
So MedTech Mastermind. And I will say, Jordan, whether you know it or not, you're actually my accountability partner on this because I sat down with you
Mm-hmm.
before I'd even made the full leap, right? And said, we had the opportunity, I think, finally to grab a cup of coffee after knowing each other for more than a decade virtually and, waving at conferences.
Yes. Our daughter was in the Nike tournament down there. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I love that. I love getting to really connect with folks and actually have those in-person conversations and just see how similar our lives are and how aligned, I think we all think we have, very unique lives, but just how aligned we are in what we are hoping to do in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And really what I see for MedTech Mastermind is a program directly focused on those individuals that are coming here and listening as new recent grads that want to get into this space. And it's creating a online forum, an online course that empowers people with the skills to break into the industry. And so some of that is the approach of like, how do you do it? Right? How do you embrace discomfort? How do you stay flexible? How do you network? How do you not be afraid to ask people to introduce you to other people?
Mm-hmm.
And then, that's like the tactical piece of like, how do you crack in? But then the skills that you need to have to actually get that door to open, right? So what is it like to be in the OR? I was fortunate in having the clinical background that I did because I could step into the OR with confidence. A lot of folks, know what med device is because they have a friend that's in it or they know they get to wear scrubs to work, but what does it mean? Like we've all heard of folks that walk into the OR on day one and touch the blue paper. Don't touch the blue paper. It's like basic things like that. But when you've been in the industry for a long time, you forget that you had to learn those. And so creating a platform that's very accessible, that has a really attainable price point to the point where, and I think I shared this with you either when we met or in, getting ready for this conversation, but my plan is to pilot it early next year with 10 folks that are going to go through the program entirely free of charge. This is my investment in the space to help drive opportunity and access, because I think the way we take better care of patients and we drive innovation and we take better care of our physician partners and the organizations that we work for is by having a diverse, dynamic, and highly skilled workforce. And I would love to be a part of changing that narrative so people come in even higher level than they normally would.
Excellent. That's just outstanding. It's needed, and you have the bona fides to drive it through. Because I think anybody sitting in that class of 10 is going to be pinching themselves. I'm learning from someone who, really put the numbers up on the board, did it the right way. When I saw you at NANS in Vegas, you couldn't walk down the hallway without 5 people stopping you, saying hi. You're extraordinarily well known and well liked in the industry. And you're the exact person that someone that wants to get in the industry should learn from, but often has no access to, or very, very limited access to.
Yeah. And I think the access problem is that, those folks, and thank you for the kind words. I attribute a lot of that to, going to sound like a broken record, right? But being humble in this space and recognizing that we all have a unique opportunity to be a small part in a bigger whole of making a really big difference in this world. And I think it's that access point, though, for those reps who want to come in, or not even reps, right? The individuals that want to come be a rep and want to learn. Oftentimes it's like, it's just a series of no's until you get to finally someone that has the time or, is willing to squeeze you in because someone who knows someone, right? And says like, yes, I'll give you an hour. But that really for me was the idea of like, okay, let's just go for broke. Truly, right? Because now I'm paying myself.
Yeah.
Let's go for broke and see what we can't do with this. Because just a quick sidebar, my very first clinical specialist is someone who I still talk with regularly. His name is Brad Martin. He is at Saluda Medical as a clinical specialist. He was my first CS when I was a rep at Boston Scientific. And when I told him, what I was doing, he looked at me and said, he's like, so are you going to do it? Are you going to start STEM school? Mm-hmm. And I kind of smiled and I was like, what are you doing? Because we talked about it for years. And so that's where, honestly, I just didn't have the guts to do it in that time. And I think that it's also really hard when you're beholden to an organization and you're beholden to numbers, right? You have a job that you're being paid to do to then also turn around and create these resources to help support others and invest in others. And so, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think it's very needed. I do feel like I'm the right person to do it. And that's why I'm so committed. And that's why I also have this deliverable of like, I told Jordan that I was going to do this and have this. And so I actually have to deliver on it this time and can't just keep talking about STEM school.
Love it. Love it. That's so great. Well, it has been fantastic having you on here as a guest. And I would love to invite you back and have you here as a return guest as you make additional further progress with the MedTech Collective and all these other initiatives you're working on. Would you come back?
I gladly. I loved our conversation. I really, I have to say, Jordan, it's been so fun to get to partner with you across the various stages of my career. I remember one of our early conversations as you were recruiting for a new Vectra, the different conversations we had when I was a leader and looking for talent, and how our partnership has grown through the years. And I just love that you've made the leap and done this podcast, because it's so important. Again, it's just like you're opening access. You're helping reps and physicians and, new grads looking to get into this space, just understand more. And that's really, really impressive.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. How can people get a hold of you, Kat?
LinkedIn, Kat Hurd, KATHURD.
Well, thank you again for everything, Kat, and for being on. And we look forward to watching you do great things. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for joining us on the Chase MedSearch podcast. I hope that you gained some helpful insight from today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and give us a like on your favorite streaming platform. It really helps grow our audience. For more information on Chase MedSearch, visit our website at chasemedsearch.com. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, I'm Jordan Chase, and this has been the Chase MedSearch Podcast.